All right. Happy Wednesday, everyone. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to be here with us on today's session. We've got an exciting discussion ahead. My name's Matt, and I'm with Kion, and today we'll be talking about accelerating your AWS CloudOps journey with secure multi-account management. In today's webinar, our presenters will be from AWS and Kion. We'll dive deep into the world of AWS CloudOps competency and how to effectively manage accounts to leverage the full potential of AWS. We'll talk about and share best practices around how to launch compliant environments, how to avoid overprivileged IAM roles, and how to stay on budget. Plus, a look at where we think it's all headed. As I mentioned earlier, feel free to submit your questions throughout today's webinar using the Q&A feature that's built into Zoom, as we'll finish today's talk with that live Q&A with our presenters. We'll also be recording today's session, and we'll provide that link to today's attendees in follow-up communication. That's really it for housekeeping. I'm pleased to introduce today's webinar's presenters. From Kion, we have Shane Quinlan, our VP of Product. Shane, great to have you here, and we'll get to you actually in a bit. But up first, really happy to introduce to all of you Frank Schwarzenau, a designation lead for Cloud Operations Competency for AWS. Frank, great to see you, and amazing to have you with us today. Welcome.
Yeah, great to be here. And I feel like, Matt, you need to host a podcast or something. Like your voice is so like soothing and nice.
I'll take it. Thank you.
I really appreciated listening to you there in the beginning. No, nice to meet you all. Very glad to be here. Shane, I think I'm going to pass it over to you after my slides here. But yeah, I'm the designation leader for our cloud operations competency. I'm going to share a couple of points about AWS CloudOps as a whole concept in AWS. Then I'll jump into the competency and why I'm excited to be here with Kion together and presenting collectively. So before I jump into the partner program and into what terms we chose Kion to be a key partner for AWS to deliver this, I wanted to share a little bit of context on what cloud operations means for AWS. And you might have seen this website down below here, AWS/CloudOps. Just to kind of give everybody an impression, it's not just a website, right? It's not just an accumulation of different solution areas in AWS. When we present something like this, when we have these kind of initiatives or programs, it kind of permeates throughout the AWS organization. So our solution architect teams, our sales teams, our partner teams are all aligned around this concept. And these 5 solution areas fit under cloud operations. So cloud governance, cloud financial management, observability, knowing what's up in your applications and your entire infrastructure, that's really important. Compliance and auditing and ops management, which is essentially the integration in any kind of ITSM platforms and decentralized operation of your services. You can approach this on a services level, right? Like Control Tower is a governance tool. Organizations is, essential for Control Tower and sits underneath. Same thing with Cost Explorer, X-Ray, and you name it. AWS is over 300 services at this point, so you can map them through the individual solution areas. But that's not necessarily what we're trying to do here, and why we've put cloud operations as a concept together. The reason for approaching this collectively, and why I'm really a big fan of Kion's approach to this, is that we value the approach to be integrated across those 5 solution areas. What we feel, or what we've seen with our customers, sometimes you focus a little bit too much on one and a little bit too less on another, and you're trying to stitch together a solution on all your different needs. The fact is that an effective cloud operational model needs to include components for all 5 of these, and partners and customers that approach this holistically have seen the most amount of traction. And to quantify that traction, we have actually put together a study here. For those that want to drill down, please use the QR code here in the top. And the study was to understand what our customers see in terms of return on investment and investing into cloud operations for their dollars. So the number of 241 of top line, but as well as bottom line productivity increases by approaching this is pretty staggering. So I invite you all to check this one out. And of course, check out the website for more information about cloud operations as a concept. And as I said in the beginning, we're trying to align our motions across the teams. So the partner team that I'm part of in April this year has launched the partner competency for cloud operations. And for anyone out there that doesn't know what an AWS competency is, it is essentially a very structured and very difficult stamp of approval that some key partners get for specific value propositions. These could be horizontal, these could be vertical. In our case, this is including for all of cloud operations. So what we do is, as AWS, we speak to thousands of customers, right? And we're trying to accumulate the most acute, the most pressing, and the most important problem statements that our customers have. And we're trying to define these as use cases. As you know, AWS is extremely customer obsessed. So we're taking it from the customer and we're defining the use case. We're defining our best practices and how we think that those problems should be solved. So for each of these 5 solution areas, we have predefined use cases. Matt, I think you're going to share a link later after this presentation, or during this presentation, actually, for anybody that wants to drill down on these use cases and see, okay, what is security management and governance? You know, like what are the hoops that I made Kion jump through, and that we have validated Kion for being a valued partner for these. So please check it out. And also reach out to me if you think that I missed anything. You know, this is a living and breathing document or living and breathing validation checklist. We're trying to always keep the latest use cases up here. But yeah, that's how we validate our partners. And we're trying to shine the light on these partners that have been validated, right? So sometimes when I'm at the party and I need to just define of what my job is, and I need to put it in a nutshell, it's essentially, I'm trying to identify the rising stars of partners in the partner ecosystem. AWS is over 100,000 partners, and only very few have made the cut to get into this partner competency. So there's a lot of applications, there's a lot of rejections, but I'm very happy to be here with Kion because you guys have this competency, and that makes us excited to promote you more and to give you the visibility, because in our view, you are having the gold standard of approaches to these problem statements. Some of the benefits that partners like Kion get and why they stay ahead is that despite just being validated on a technical level, they have incredible access to AWS resources. So it's streamlined for solution resources. If you as a customer have a problem that Kion is helping you with, Kion basically has the speed dial of all of the important folks at AWS because of that competency that they're a member of. And also what's very important in terms of forward-looking expectations. So a lot of you probably get over-flooded with announcements on AWS during reInvent, our flagship event of the year. But I can guarantee you that I'll make sure that, or I'm making sure that Kion has this visibility ahead of you and is able to serve their customers with that sort of looking around the corner visibility. So that's why I'm excited to be here. Other than the CloudOps competency that I'm leading, Kion has racked up a bunch of other accreditations here that are listed on the right. And I'm super happy that I'm working with you a lot more as of recently, and that we teamed up for Reinforce, and that I'm able to shine that light on you. Yeah, I'm excited to be here, and I'm happy to take any questions after the conversations from Shane.
Awesome. Taking the mic from there, I mean, we're excited to be here with AWS too, and excited to get the chance to talk about how Kion helps accelerate that CloudOps journey on AWS. We've helped dozens of customers across public and private sector get to a better place faster with how they're taking advantage of the capabilities in AWS, using Kion as that catalyst to help them drive towards greater cloud enablement. So we're here to help people redefine their experience in the cloud. We want it to be simple. We want it to be easy. We want it to be repeatable and not have waste, not be frustrating. And we think we're doing a great job at it. And obviously AWS does too, which we're super appreciative of. So yeah, I mean, we've been helping folks since 2018 move further and faster on AWS. Today, we're helping manage over $750 million in cloud spend, which is pretty huge. And it's great to see us start to get recognized and pull in those awards and get those accreditations to demonstrate the value that we're bringing to our customers. And I think that gets to sort of a bigger piece, which is for folks who might not be as familiar or who didn't get a chance to check out the website beforehand, what is Kion? And ultimately what Kion is it's a cloud governance software that helps you bring together all these different pieces of your cloud estate with clear visibility for what you're doing, the ability to set and control costs, and have scalable methods to automate compliance in the cloud. We help you across AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. We help with compliance, financial management, and automation and orchestration. And together, those capabilities gives us a really unique and powerful tool to help folks accelerate towards that cloud operating model, that ultimate maturity that they want to drive towards. So when it comes to what makes Kion different from other vendors that are out there, what we really focus on is going beyond that report and remediate side of cloud governance. We're really focused on being proactive and preventative in the way that we help you set and define policies that control the way you manage cloud, which is a long way of saying that we help you from the jump set the controls that you need to make cloud powerful and useful, and not just sit there and give you dashboards of reports of things that are going wrong that you have to go out and fix. We help get in front of that so it never happens. We install a self-hosted SaaS, which gives you a lot more control over what data you get access to and how our tool gets access within your cloud estate. We also give you native access to those cloud capabilities. We get you right into AWS. We're not there to be a gatekeeper. We're not there to be a service catalog that you pick and choose. We're not there to be an arbitrary interface to get access to everything in AWS. We're there to make sure that as you move through Kion to get to cloud resources, you have policies wrapped around what you're doing, that you have access tied to your corporate SSO. And we make it really simple and easy for you to get up and running in the AWS CLI, the SDK, the actual management console, whatever it is that you need. We're not there to hold your hands or hold you back. We're there to get you into the service. And lastly, Kion is in this unique position of serving both technical and non-technical users, and doing that really well by having an interface that is beautiful and gives you powerful controls for what you're doing and makes it make sense, not just for your boss, but also for the people who are having to do the work of setting and controlling automation, vending accounts to different users, and getting people up and running and developing applications in the cloud. So today, I don't want to spend all day talking about Kion. I am definitely going to talk about Kion, but what I do want to do is take a step back and talk about Kion's perspective on cloud operations, CloudOps. How it is that we think about addressing and meeting the needs of our customers, helping them get to a better place, and what that ultimately means for customers trying to get there. The biggest thing I want to come back to when it comes to talking about CloudOps is making sure that we're all kind of on the same page about what CloudOps is. And that's what I really love about the AWS perspective and the competency group that they built around this, is the way that they're talking about cloud operations. It's holistic, but it's fundamentally a culture shift. And culture shifts are built on shared principles. CloudOps is not an app. It's not a service. It's not Kion. It's not AWS. Cloud operations is about a holistic way of managing the way that you deal with cloud on a day-to-day basis. It's not about that migration, getting everything you have up and into the cloud. It's not a digital transformation with a new coat of paint. Cloud operations is about the way that you address cloud as a part of your real world day-to-day. It's about how well you support your organization or your mission on cloud. And it's about enabling your organization and your customers to take full advantage of what the cloud uniquely offers. Because cloud is fundamentally different. It's not about what we can offer on services like AWS, but fundamentally what that enables, that rapid scalability, provisioning, infrastructure as code, all of these pieces that make cloud computing unique. That's what we're trying to give folks access to through cloud operations. So as Kion, when we think about what does it mean, what are those shared principles around helping folks achieve cloud operations and work towards that mature cloud operating model, I really see two sides to that. One is really centered around trust. And trust comes from developing a system that is secure by default, meaning that we're making sure that users can't create problems or get in our own way as we start taking advantage of the cloud. We want to minimize security risk by setting proactive and preventative controls. We want to make management simple, not just pile on complexity. And we want to make sure that as we move to the cloud and take advantage of what it has to offer, that we're building trust with stakeholders so they understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, and why it matters. Secure by default is ultimately about trust. It's about trusting everyone in the organization to take advantage of all the power that AWS has to offer without worrying that someone's going to accidentally expose an S3 bucket or accidentally leave something running all weekend that's going to rack up 100,000 in charges or something like that. It's about developing that trust and establishing that secure by default baseline, whether you're brand new and don't know where to get started and overwhelmed, or whether you've been managing your migration to the cloud for a couple of years and it has become complicated and ungainly. It all comes back to that core principle of, if we can establish secure by default, and not just secure in the sense of threat actors can't get access to my data or resources, but secure in that we're meeting our compliance obligations and that we are financially secure as well. That holistic sense of security is essential to making sure that the cloud does what it needs to do, which is enable the business. And ultimately, what I think that brings is confidence, trust at the core of confidence, and that confidence for all, that anyone who wants access to or wants to improve their ability to work in the cloud can get that. This chart here is number of job postings that include AWS over time. And you'll see it just skyrockets up. And it's not just because AWS is growing exponentially, and they are. It's because those skills are essential to being a competitive and modern enterprise. So how do we give folks access to that? Clearly, everybody is not going to be this unicorn candidate who has experience with multi-cloud governance and has worked on all these software projects. There just aren't enough people who've done that long enough to meet the demand. The way that we do that is giving folks access and trusting them to have access and letting them be confident users of the cloud so that they can educate themselves and improve themselves. We need systems of transparency that folks can understand what our cloud estate looks like, where we're going. And we also need systems of accountability. It cannot be the responsibility of just the CTO or just the Cloud Center of Excellence to wrangle all of this. Accountability has to be distributed. So secure by default and confidence for all. And what I love is that I'm starting to see this more in conversations that we're having at the policy level as well. This year, CISA has launched this big push talking about secure by default and secure by design. And I think ultimately cloud operations is tied in intimately with that concept. You know, a secure configuration should be the default baseline so that you can't get in your own way. So how do we put those principles into practice? Because we all know that it's one thing to have grand statements. We all know it's something else entirely to put those into practice in the reality of our day-to-day. So I'm going to walk through some best practices that we bring, some examples of how we've seen that, how we've worked with AWS to enable that, and how Kion helps make that faster. So those 4 best practices are putting people first, focusing on guardrails, starting with continuous processes, and keeping it repeatable. So let's get into that first one. Let's talk about putting people first. So when it comes to putting people first, ultimately what we have to recognize is that even when we're talking about technology and cloud and everything else, at the end of the day, we're talking about people. So I come back to this example, and this is a real story that came from early in my career, which is the CEO came and was like, hey, I want to understand for each product line, you know, what's our ROI? How much are we spending? What is each product contributing to our ARR? What does that look like? And I was like, okay, cool. Hey, can I get access to AWS financials? And it became really complicated. I mean, the IT ticket sat. There was no process to figure out how to get access to that. They didn't have any roles set up with policies that restricted it to read only around financials. And there wasn't anybody who really had time to help support or enable that easily. And so that just lingered. And so instead of being able to answer this question and start to show that ROI over time, it got lost in limbo. And, you know, I think the way that we solve for this is that we make sure that we have the cloud that we have reflect our organization in a way that lets us make it easy to give folks access to just the piece that they need. We all have organizational designs. We all have cloud architectures, and sometimes never the twain shall meet. So how do we handle that? You know, tools like AWS Organizations and Control Tower make it easy for you to map out your cloud architecture within the context of an organizational design. And that starts helping you make sense of what's doing what, where, and when. And if you think about accounts, inside AWS as the container around those resources and a reflection of this distinct unit in your organizational design, it starts to make your life a whole lot easier. If you can wrap up your product line and maybe even your development and prod environments in their own accounts, that roll up into their own OUs, that roll up under this management account that you can manage in AWS organizations, it makes it really easy for you to set discrete policies that control who gets access to what and where, and that they only get access to what they need rather than exposing everything. Part of the issue in that story I told was that we just had a management account. There was no delineation by product line. And even though we'd started working on tagging, it wasn't easy to say like, hey, you just get like this tag, read only go. But having the organization design would have made it infinitely easier for me to say like, hey, for this OU, give me an IAM user or an IAM role that I can get access to with a policy wrapped around it that only defines access to this and read only. Let's go. I could have even provided that myself. But what we're able to do inside the AWS tools and what we're able to help accelerate inside Kion is making that a lot easier to achieve. So when it comes to vending that, not just the setting up the organization design, but also integrating that with Control Tower and AWS organizations, and then helping to vend accounts within that construct. And so you can set policies and you can set access controls related to that organization, basically mapping what it is you're doing in cloud to the people that are actually working on it. It makes it a lot easier for you to hand out access. Because now you can say like, okay, based on where this sits within the organization, these are the policies that should come from it. These are the ones that should be inherited from above within the organization. This is what this person should get access to, just this part of the tree. And we're going to give them just this specific role within it. All of that is pretty easily achievable. And Kion makes that easier. We have a concept of cloud rules that helps constrain what you can and can't do, things like IAM policies and service control policies, and all those aspects of AWS that make controls powerful and repeatable. And we can associate those with enforcements so that if you meet some percentage of your budget, it's going to trigger a cloud rule that performs some action. We can also tie that to identity so that if you have a user who can only access certain things, we can create a cloud access role that'll federate that user into AWS and give them exactly what permission they need in the context of what they're working on. So the product manager can get a read-only role that's looking at just the products that he's working on. And it takes a couple clicks rather than a bunch of sitting on tickets. And I think that gets, at part of what I mean by putting people first, but it goes beyond that. Rapid provisioning helps make sure that you're not keeping value at arm's length. We're not creating latency in the way that you give access to the power of cloud. It also helps accelerate the hands-on learning. I, as a product manager, wanted access to the management console for this specific purpose, but it would have been a whole other ask for me to say, hey, I want to learn more about provisioning EC2 instances, because that would have just totally blown the system's mind too. So how do we get past that hurdle? We make sure that we create policies and controls so that folks have opportunity to get hands-on learning experiences without blowing the budget or without leading to security incidences, because we can set policies around that organizational design to make it easy for us to say, you know what, this is a sandbox account. We can provision it just for today. They can do whatever they want, up to $200. Great, have fun. They can't hurt anything, can't touch anything, can't do anything wrong. The bumpers are up, go bowling, have fun. All of that is infinitely achievable. It's just making it easy and repeatable. And Kion helps you with making sure that that part of the process is something that you can take advantage of rapidly and easily. The last thing I'll say about putting people first is that when it comes to the way that you think about architecting the way that you manage cloud, the policies that you set, and the way that you give folks access, we have to make sure that we're designing systems that we have with empathy for the actual human at the end of the day who has to go and use it. It cannot be a policy for the sake of a policy. It has to be a policy to help people. So that's putting people first. I know, heavy, it's a lot, but it all comes together here. So, all right, we agree, it's people. What do we need to do about that? How can we set these controls? And again, it comes back to those putting the bumpers on the bowling lane, that focus on guardrails. So another example I saw in the healthcare side, it's a new CTO, it comes in, is asked to like, hey, we got to focus on AI because nobody's doing that right now, right? Yeah. All right, so we got to focus on AI. I need to hire some data scientists. I need to make sure that they can take advantage of some of these new tools that are getting launched. How are we going to take advantage of all these new LLM models? How do we make that play? We haven't done anything like that before. We kind of want to give that team a sandbox to get going. you have a CCOE, that Cloud Center of Excellence, and there's really no process for this established yet. So you kind of start having the conversation of, well, maybe they can sort of just run that in their own account until we figure out how to pull that into the organization. And where does that end up? As soon as you come up for your end of year audit, or you start talking to the security team or anything like that, everyone freaks out because now you've created this entirely separate enclave that has different rules for the way that they engage with cloud. And bringing that in later is even harder. I mean, are they going to be using the same control systems, the same policies? If they develop something better than what you're using for your standard development environment, can you take advantage of that? Or is it not cross-compatible? And that's where this whole system of guardrails really comes into play. It should not be this crazy stretch for you to be able to say, like, all right, we've set some non-negotiable policies in terms of what we don't or do want people to do. And we want to make sure that this data science organization fits within that. And tools like AWS Organizations and Control Tower and AWS CloudFormation as well make that super simple for you to set that construct, set your non-negotiables, inherit from that, create a space for them to work, but work within the confines of that larger organization, but also get access to the tools that they need. It shouldn't be about withholding access. It should be about providing the right amount of access to the right user at the right time. And guardrails help you do that. So you can work through organizations and set guardrails with SEPs and make sure that you're provisioning sandboxes on unique accounts that have inherited policies that you're already running. And you can use CFT stacks or the service catalog provision sandbox resources and make sure that you have cost controls wrapped around that. All of that is possible in AWS through the native tooling. And again, what Kion does isn't take that away or provide a different way of doing that. We give you tools to do that faster and to do it in a more repeatable way across your organization. Whether you're pulling from several accounts, some of which do or don't have organizations, or some of which do or don't have Control Tower, we can help you stitch together that composite picture and set controls globally across that. And an example here is our enforcements, which help tie to some of these cost controls. You know, we set it up so that you can automatically have a, hey, we're going to start turning resources off if you hit 90% of your budget for the month. It seems really simple. It's a bit heavy-handed when it comes to production environments. But for something like a sandbox environment, it makes it really simple for you to be able to set controls for what people can do within what constraints. And it ensures that you don't have this problem of, well, what if they accidentally write some looping thing that starts running and starts clocking up charges and it's not actually generating value? You can build these safety nets. We can do, notify only or automatically enforce. We can shut down resources or just tell your boss. Like, it's all of this is possible when you make it very simple to set up inside of Kion. When it comes to guardrails, it's about the fact that CloudOps is not police work. There's not enough of us. There's not enough time. Teams have to be accountable for themselves. And the way that you empower them to be accountable for themselves is by creating the conditions for success by default, security by default, ease of use by default, setting rules that inherit and can be added to meet all those varying demands so that teams can be accountable, so that policies rule the world, and so that you can inherit controls for the organization instead of having to reinvent the wheel every time. So then we get to starting with continuous. So another example I've seen, you come in, it's a new CISO, you're coming in like, hey, we want to do a SOC 2 Type 2 kickoff for this year. You're like, great, that's awesome. Where's the artifacts? And they're like, you know what? Bob did this every year. We've kind of got this Excel spreadsheet that he did. You can kind of pull stuff from here and from there. And here's the blank spreadsheet for 2023. Go. And if you've been there, because I've been there, it's terrifying because you're like, all right, I have to go and find all of this evidentiary collection. Not only do I have to demonstrate the controls and update the documentation there, but prove the work. And especially as compliance frameworks, even in the Department of Defense or even in SOC 2, are moving towards this continuous, random audits and continuous evidentiary collection. It's making it harder for you to make sure that you can do this. It can't be an annual exercise for you to do compliance. So what do? You start with a continuous process by default. You make sure that you can always present evidence, that it's always collected in the right way and it's always available. And that makes sense for compliance, but it extends beyond that too. I mean, in this example, it's really powerful to have something like the AWS Shared Responsibilities Matrix to show what controls you inherit. Then you can use Control Tower to orchestrate some of those continuous compliance controls. You can use custom SCPs to establish policies around the org. And then you can centralize the evidence collection with a tool like AWS Audit Manager. And that's a really fantastic way to use all of the native AWS tools to do this. And not only do it once, but to build something that works continuously. We're doing this with platform teams the world over. We're running platforms like products now. And if you start with a continuous process for the way that you think about infrastructure and cloud, now an annual event that will automate later is something that you've actually automated and don't have to think about later. And you can stop staring at Excel, hopefully. So in Kion, again, a lot of what we do is help customers make this go faster and scale faster, move across more of the organization. So we're taking some of those same things and extending it. So here you see an example of a compliance check inside Kion. We give you tools out of the box to help you apply compliance controls all over the organization, wherever you need to ensure that if you have something getting federal funding, it's covered by NIST 853, or if you're doing healthcare research, we have HIPAA controls. We give you that out of the box and let you modify it and meet it to your organization so that you have something that can be applied not just on one team, but across teams and provide that evidentiary piece constantly. Kion can self-report what users have access to what through our cloud access rules, what policies that we've enforced through cloud rules, and then even the compliance regimes and how we're meeting those inside Kion as well. So again, it's a way for you to accelerate that evidentiary collection and get to that same place you can with the native tooling, but get there fast, get there easy, get there simple. With Kion. So the last best practice, I've kind of been harping on it a little bit, but it's about keeping things repeatable, making sure that what you build can be extended across your organization and get to where it needs to be. You want to be able to build a process, share it with others, use it again. It can't be something that only works in my account. I mean, that's kind of the new, it only works on my computer. It also can't rely too heavily on one vendor. It has to be something cloud native that you can take with you. So this is another example that I've seen is you have a VP of engineering, you have one of your development teams. They've done a really fantastic job. They've built all of these service control policies to enforce NIST 853 controls for their project. You go to spin up a new dev team, you're like, great, we're going to take all of that, we're going to run with it. And they're like, yeah, it doesn't exactly work that way. And you start getting into the why and you realize that things have been architected in a way that speaks specifically to that piece of the org, but aren't quite lift and shift. And that, like, not being able to bring and share value, is infinitely frustrating. Like, if you have a team that is leading, if you have a cloud center of excellence or a really proficient development team, they should be able to share best practices and lead the way. And they should be able to use cloud native tools that are always going to be available, not something that is a vendor that might come and go. And you want to make sure that everything's available as code all the time, always, everywhere. What that ends up looking like to solve for this problem where you have one team that's doing it great, how do you extend it? All right, great. Start from the top level, use AWS Control Tower and organizations to model your organization, set those baseline controls. And then once you've established those policies that define what an account is bound by within that part of the organization, everything that you provision in there is already covered. And you can layer on lambdas and CFTs and other functions to help orchestrate that further. But the core of it is setting those default inherited controls that you can lift and shift across the organization to get to a process that is repeatable. So that once you establish, this is the way that we secure an account, and this is what that means when it's configured within this part of the organization. That gives you something that is powerful, extensible, repeatable, and easier to understand. And this is a quick view of what that looks like inside Kion. A lot of what we show inside Kion centers around the organization chart, which is this view that shows you your entire organization, all the accounts within it, all the policies that are set, the way that money is being spent, how you're handling compliance. But it shows it in a way that helps you understand it as a human and come up with a process that is repeatable, that has inherited controls, that is something that you can bring with you across the organization. So here at the top, you can see, for the entire company, we have our non-negotiable policies that we've set, and that inherits down across everything. So you've ensured that it's inherited because you've set it at the top. And now it's repeatable across every part of the organization. If you need to set exclusions, you can. If you need to tweak it, if you need to layer on, you can add all that complexity down to the organization. But you ensure that the pieces that you need to have are always repeatable. So, wrapping it up. We talked about putting people first, setting guardrails, keeping things continuous, making it repeatable, and what that actually means in the real world. But what it really means is that, cloud operations is about the way that governance enables agility, and agility enables governance, and the symbiotic relationship between the two. And not in a way that just looks like a cute infinity symbol on a white paper, but in a real and tangible way that helps teams achieve the goals that they need with agility, and do it in a way with governance that ensures they aren't slowed down by having to go back and fix something, figuring out something that wasn't repeatable, finding something that didn't work, having to restart the audit process every year, all those things that can slow us down. The promise of the cloud is that it enables this continuous capability, this feedback loop between governance and agility. That's the power of cloud. And we have all the tools to help achieve that. It's a matter of composing them in the right way. AWS has everything that you need to do that. And Kion's here to help folks take advantage of that faster and easier, regardless of where you are in your cloud journey. Starting from scratch or 3 years in and through 6 acquisitions, and now you're trying to cobble together a shared controls framework for everybody. Either way, we're here to help you make sure that day 1 and day 2 of running cloud in your business is contributing towards the business and not something that's dragging you down as you try to move forward. So, how do we put this into practice? I'll give you a really good case study and some more information on our website as well. But we were brought into a really large civilian federal agency to help them figure out how to wrangle what they were doing with cloud. They had all of these accounts. They were having a really hard time giving cloud to users and making sure that the teams that were working on behalf of that federal agency could get access to the resources they needed, with the data that they needed, with the user access that they needed. And it didn't take 2 or 3 weeks. They needed it to happen so much faster. So we came in and we helped them standardize the account creation process. We helped enforce budgets on what they were spending by default, add in compliance checks to identify waste. And ultimately, what we found is that we were able to use enforcements to help eliminate cost overruns. We brought that account provisioning process from 6 weeks to 2 hours from approval. And then we brought in all these checks and automatic remediations that made the compliance problem so much easier to deal with every year. We were always collecting information, so when it came time for them to report on evidence, it was immediately available. And this construct of taking advantage of the power of AWS, using tools like organizations behind the scenes, and helping us make sure that the way that their cloud worked met their organization and made sense to people, helped them extend this model further and further and further so that they could add a new user in a new account, give them federated access into that with a cloud access role, bound it in policies with our cloud rules, and then use that to get users online super rapidly. So that's the power of what Kion can do. And you can see some examples of it here. This is in the back, you've got our account provisioning process, and then you can see the account. It's got labels, so you have context around what is bounded by that account and what's within it, what policies you're going to apply it by, what are inherited, what are local to that part of the organization. And then there's our budget that we're running, or tracking spend month by month and setting enforcements to make sure we don't run over. Kion helps make all of that just easier to wrangle and gives you that standard control plane across all of your cloud estate, help you see what's happening, get access to it, and quickly make decisions to help ensure that the process just gets better. So things are changing though, and for the better. I don't think anybody here hasn't played with a large language model or a tool like ChatGPT or Code Whisperer. We're all having fun playing and experimenting with it, and going beyond experimentation to making it essential to the way that we build our business or the way that we do our job every day. And I think that's changing the user experience demands for everything, including cloud operations. Our experience with the cloud, what we can do, what we want to do, what we should do, all of our expectations for that are starting to change as we realize that we can engage with complex subjects as a human asking questions. And I think that's really cool. And that's something I'm excited about working on in Kion, is how we think about constructing systems that help speak to that. Not that we're going to necessarily build a chat interface, but that taking that same concept of, I don't need to have the dashboard of everything. I want to make sure that cloud works for me, that it's taking care of things, that it's doing work, and that I trust it. And that kind of human element of trust and confidence, I think, is essential to the way that cloud operations is going to advance. And I think that as that emphasis on automation continues and more capabilities come into play, it's going to change the way that we engage with cloud operations. And it's going to give us more time to think strategically, not just about what we want that system to look like and how we can optimize it, but about how we can bring better architecture to the very beginning of our cloud maturity journey, so that we can set that better foundation from the way that we think about designing cloud, not just something that we have to handle as we start building. And I think that's going to be really fun and interesting to go to this place where we're not spending as much time writing automation necessarily, or managing the day-to-day, or trying to intuit some divine something from a dashboard. But we have choices we can make, automations that we trust, and that we're spending our time thinking about how to build optimally and how to adjust what we have, rather than trying to, hold on to the train while it's already running. And that's what I'm really excited about, where cloud operations is heading next, what AWS is starting to deliver from a capability standpoint, and how we can continue to work together on that. So yeah, that's how I think about cloud operations inside Kion. I'm super passionate about it. I'm happy to talk about it and continue the conversation on LinkedIn. And I think we're going to have a little bit of time for Q&A and go from there.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Thank you, Shane, as well as Frank, to you earlier, for that deep look into cloud operations and for some of the tips and insight you shared throughout around secure multi-account management. It's definitely time for our... Oh, go ahead, Frank.
One thing that I just one comment real quick, and this was, I always love listening to these conversations as well, especially having a good speaker like you, Shane. But one of the things that we see in AWS a lot is that piece of how can we validate partners that are bringing the value to the customer over and over again. So some partners, they can do it once, they have some good use cases, whatever. But I think that repeatability, that continuity, and that trust is super important. So, like being able to shift away from like the headache of cloud operations to actually focus on business relevant activities and initiatives, and just having that trusted partner on your side, I think is awesome. But yeah, I forgot what you called it, or whether you call it repeatability or continuity, but that really resonated, and that's something that we're definitely looking at for our partners as well.
Beautiful. I see some questions rolling in, so I want to make sure we get to them. Again, feel free to submit your questions into the Q&A feature. We did get a few that rolled in here. We actually just got a one in the chat around if we have any documentation around feature parity between AWS, Azure, maybe other cloud providers. Shane, maybe something we could follow up with, or something we could post quickly. I'm not sure if we have anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's materials on the website. I will say that, our goal is always to maintain that parity of those kinds of controls, to have cloud rules and enforcements and cloud access roles across all three of those providers. Obviously, today we're talking a lot about AWS, and AWS is a really strong partner in how we achieve that. The short answer is
other providers.
Yeah, I don't really know.
I've never, yeah,
I haven't never heard of them.
I'm sure there's more materials that we could provide afterwards, Andrew. I appreciate you asking that.
Absolutely. I got one that came in through the Q&A, and I think it's for Frank. So for you, what help or support requests do you hear most frequently from your customers?
That's a good one. So maybe I'll start a little broader. So in AWS, if a customer has an issue or an account representative needs help on any kind of technology, any kind of vertical, they file a request. All of it is automated. All of it is extremely efficient, but it also allows us to gain visibility into what are the top requests from our customers. Right now, cloud operations as a group of requests I think we have 54 categories or something, is number 6, which is very high up. So we have, I think, close to 10,000 requests. And within that, governance is the largest one. So, that account managing, account provisioning, control tower, those are requests that a lot of our customers are working with. And that's why I'm really excited for you to have such a good solution on this one, because it really kind of answers that number one request within CloudOps.
Perfect. Thank you, Frank. Another question that came in through Q&A for Shane. Thank you so much for all the information. How do I get started on a multi-account strategy?
Yeah, that's a really good one. I think it's interesting because we see organizations in a whole spectrum of starting places when it comes to trying to approach this. But it sort of trends towards 2 focal points on that spectrum. The first is you sort of got started, you have a management account, you maybe have a dev and a prod account, and that's it, and you've just grown, and it's just, there are too many things under one bucket. And so it's how do I go from this to carving it up? And I think it's really about, when we start engaging with a customer like that, the first thing we talk about is really organizational design, which isn't glamorous, but that is the real brain power, the strategic part of thinking about how to accelerate that and move that forward. If you're really lucky and you're in the position of, you haven't even really made that your main line, how you're going to support, you haven't really started building the cloud the way that you want to from a production context. You're kind of starting from scratch. You've played around. You don't know what to do. It makes it a little bit easier because you can sort of reset those baselines, decide on the architecture you want, and start moving towards it. But again, it comes down to thinking through, what is the way that you think about managing the people in your organization today, and then mapping that back to cloud. Cloud should be a reflection of the organization of people, not a reflection of the organization of resources necessarily. And accounts are a really great way of thinking about containers. And I know I'm using the word containers here, but you think about it as a boundary, a container, a border around that collection of resources that is bound to a certain group of people in a certain context. So this team, their production environment, that gets an account. And then building that up within different layers of the org so you can see how it tiers out. So from the whole organization to this department, to this sub-department, to this project, to the product environment in that department, and start to work from there. And really what we tend to do is we start with one vertical slice of the organization, and then start working that out. So we start to understand what works and what doesn't. And we've even had customers who've had big pivots once they sort of get that in motion and realize what they need to do. So that's one focal point, the sort of starting from either big accounts or from no accounts and helping them grow. And I think the important part about that focal point is that, kind of like Frank mentioned earlier, sometimes it's overwhelming to try and think through all the pieces that you have to control, and you end up biasing towards one piece of it or another. You have someone who's maybe very security minded, but maybe you're not worried so much about budgetary controls until you're really worried about budgetary controls. Or you're not worried about compliance until all of a sudden you have a customer who says hey, I need you to show me your SOC 2 type 2. And you're like, all right, let's scramble, let's go. What I think the cloud operations practice, in particular, the way that AWS frames it and the way that we try and address it inside Kion does really well is think about it holistically and make sure that you're addressing it from a standpoint of, I can address security and compliance and budgets. They are all aspects of that secure by default philosophy. If I can address them with preventative and proactive controls, then everything I build from this point forward takes advantage of that. And so as I add more accounts, they're bound by those same controls and we're off to the races. For large organizations, that's really the other focal point. The organization is loud, it's messy, it's big. Maybe we've had M&A or other parts that have sort of collided parts of these organizations together. A lot of times those customers say, I just want to understand what's happening with all of my cloud. And they're right, it's a little bit messy. And what Kion helps is it can stitch together across different AWS organizations, different management accounts, different running control tower. It can pull all of that into a single view to help you get your lay of the land and then decide how you want to start migrating and moving forward. And we tend to work with organizations to start with one part of the organization, get the model the right way they want to, and start working more and more of the organization into that. Just like I talked about with organizations starting from scratch, you sort of build that perfect slice and start repeating it. And you can do the same thing in large organizations too, once you're able to sort of collate everything and get it to one place. And then you can start getting everybody under one AWS organizations and making sure you have the right kind of accounts, and that access to those accounts is controlled the same way. They're bound by the same sets of policies, and you can start bringing more people under this controlled tent. Yeah, I mean, they are very different situations, and we've helped with both and everything sort of in between. But when it comes to getting started, it's about thinking through your organization design and the controls that you want to have, and then figuring out how to model that once and then repeat that again and again. So it's really mental work. It's something that all of us are doing every day. We're all in technology because we're builders and engineers and thinkers. It's what we love doing. We just need to take that and extend it a bit to what we're doing in cloud.
Awesome. Thank you, Shane. We did get a couple other questions, some quick ones that came in around the Kion tool itself. I shared some links with you individually, but for those of you wondering, support.kion.io for all of your documentation needs around the product. We got some great stuff there. Last question that I think that came in also for Shane, very similar to Frank's. In this case, though, could you share what types of recent requests or trends that you get from your customers about their needs and how you might be addressing them?
Requests and trends. Yeah. A lot of what we end up talking about is identity, and coming back to that point of, as a user getting access to resources, how are we ensuring that that user gets access to what they need, and only what they need, and only when they need it. And that, I think, has been really interesting and powerful, is seeing this, not just when folks talk about zero trust or some of these other established principles, but when they're talking about the reality of how they're managing their business. A lot of it comes back to identity and how they center and want to center a lot of policies and organization around that federated access into cloud resources and how they're managing that. Folks have mature thoughts on how to do that. They don't know how to put them in practice sometimes, or they're worried about how painful the integration is going to be or something like that. And that's something we've seen again and again with Kion that's really powerful and really helpful and helps get us past sort of that initial hurdle, is mapping into our cloud access roles to get folks access to their cloud resources like that. Because you set up the SSO, you have the 80 groups, you map them to what roles you want them to have access to inside Kion, and off they go, getting access to the tools and the parts of the cloud that they need. And that, centering it around identity, I think there's a lot more that I want to do there with the product, and a really powerful foundation that we currently have that we can build upon. But that, I think, is sort of where we see, some centrality, some trends, some additional requests, is how we can do that part and make sure that as we talk about people and their identities and access to cloud, that's where we're centering our efforts.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for both your and Frank's insight. Really appreciate it. No other questions have come in. So thank you again for joining today's webinar. We hope you got a lot out of this session. And thanks again to Frank and Shane for your insight and expertise that you've shared today. It's much appreciated. If you'd like to learn even more about Kion, you can join our monthly live tour demo series, or even request a personalized demo over at kion.io. I'll share also the links in the Zoom chat here for you if you want to just get into there. Also, hope to see you out in the real world as well. So we'll be at EDUCAUSE in Chicago this October, and we'll be at reInvent in November in Las Vegas. Again, we'll make this recording of today's webinar available shortly to all the attendees in a follow-up communication. But unless there's anything else, have a great day, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Thanks for having me, and I'm super happy to see you guys have so much traction. So let's keep it up, and yeah, I'll be in reInvent too, so I'll see you out there.
We'll see you there, Frank. Thank you, everyone.
Take care, everybody.